after much consternation between the media and the fans of Mercedes' performance in the first test of pre-season testing, at the second test, Mercedes turned up with an almost B-spec car. Huge changes to the W10 from front to rear. But first of all, we should look at the things that haven't changed. As much as we call this as a B-spec, I tend to call a B-spec when they've done some big structural changes. But this car under the skin is very much the car we saw launched and then testing in the first week of testing. So it retains the same structure, suspension, the same wheelbase, the same level of rake. None of that has changed. The power unit hasn't changed either, as far as we can tell. So this is very much a cosmetic or aerodynamic update to the car. And as I say, it changes from front to rear. So let's have a look at some of the details to find out exactly how they've changed this car now. Much of the talk at its launch was about the front wing end plate that had the top edge just leaning in slightly, which lots of people were starting to think, is this an in-wash design front wing end plate or is it still an outwash? I explained it's something slightly in between the two. That concept's gone. We've now got a fairly flat, curved end plate, and they've just put this notch here in the top rear corner. And what this is doing is this is creating a vortex both on this top edge and this top edge, which helps to just offset the wake and the vortices that come off the tyre in this area. In between the end plates, the front wing itself hasn't really changed that much in terms of it's still 5-element full width. They haven't gone to this Alfa Romeo Ferrari style downswept wing at the tips. Toto Wolff actually said it would take them 4 months to develop a wing like this. I actually think he's probably exaggerating there. I'm sure if Mercedes really wanted that performance, they would get it much quicker. That said, I think there's enough working on Mercedes aerodynamically for them to continue to run the car without this change in front wing concept. But there are more interesting bits and pieces further down the car. With the car in the garage, a little detail here, which a lot of people are now thinking back to sort of 2008 when cars ran the fins on the nose or the elephant ears. They're the Honda team, obviously Mercedes, forebear had on the front of their car. It's just these little winglets here. Now these aren't winglets being used to create downforce. They're actually pointing the opposite way. They're actually creating a little bit of lift. And these are actually working as part of the barge board and side pod package to create some downwash. So the airflow comes up off of the wing, and the teams want to turn that down in order to get it around the undercut of the side pods and around the side of the side pods. So these bits, as we'll see with some other aspects of the aero at the side of the car, really just trying to create some downwash around the front. Now in the beautiful Barcelona sunshine, we can see the real bulk of the change here, which is in the side pods and in the barge board package. Now the barge boards themselves have become even more complicated. This has been very much a Mercedes trademark for several seasons now, and you've just got lots of extra flicks and lots of down shaped bodywork around the back here. But the key ones, along with these fins that we saw at the front, are these big downward turned fins attached to the side of the chassis. Now they're allowed in this area because it's just outside the height exclusion zone that prevents the barge boards themselves being much higher. And as you can see here, these are pointing downwards, so they're actually creating some lift. But overall, the effect that they have is to create downwash and push airflow into the undercut area of the side pod along the floor towards the diffuser. This creates more pressure over the diffuser, gives you more downforce, despite the loss that you have at the front here. And this is something that we saw with some FlowViz tests, even without these in test one. You saw how the airflow would go along the side of the chassis and then turn rapidly downwards before the front of the side pods. So the actual side pod cooling air is coming from much higher up over here and coming with a general downwash over the bodywork into the very low and very narrow inlet. Again, we see the very narrow sides of the side pods, which have changed as well. Again, I don't believe the internals have changed. I don't think they've changed the radiators, which would be sitting slanted, sort of flat in this kind of area. But what they've done is they've flattened the bodywork off over the top of the radiators, kind of where the TR here is on the Petronas logo. So the side pods are much more flattened now, and you can see, very much like we've seen with the Red Bull and the Toro Rosso, that the flow going over the side pods, they're trying to get it to go down and tuck it underneath the Coke bottle area at the back of the side pods here, along with this downwash airflow we spoke about with the undercut before, again, directing airflow to create more pressure over the diffuser for more downforce. So big changes there. We've also seen other little changes. There's a T-wing at the back, some tweaks around the rear wing, and along the floor, copying something that Ferrari did last year, is just to put a little series of vertical fins up to about 5 centimetres, which is as high as you're allowed to get in the side pod area before it gets subject to certain regulatory geometry rules. So That's as high as these are allowed to be. It's not because they don't want them to be high. They probably would do if they could. And these are just working with the edge of the floor to get the airflow that's coming underneath the floor from the splitter here and the airflow that's coming out wide around the edge of the floor, just to spin it up and push it outwards of the rear tyre. And this also helps push the front tyre wake away from the rear bodywork, which is obviously what the key driver for the aerodynamics in Formula One are at the moment. Much as people look at these areas and say this is about sealing the floor, it's not really about sealing the floor. In the old days, you would have a vortex working like a skirt under here, but that's just not the case now. They're actually trying to make the airflow come out and back in exactly where they want it. So it's not about sealing, it's actually about pushing the airflow into the right place at the right time.